Okay, we'll just wait a few more minutes. Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our second webinar as part of the workforce development series we are doing. So this one is 20 Trends Shaping Tourism Recovery in Southeastern Ontario. Today's presenter is a destination development strategist with 18 years of experience working with leadership teams. Oliver is an expert in the design of quantitative research to identify innovations in destination and brand strategy. Over his career, Oliver has worked with over 50 tourism management organizations to develop sustainable growth plans and measure impact. At 2031, Oliver advises destinations on how to utilize research insights to development and assess strategy. Oliver started his career at the Canadian Tourism Commission, Canada's national tourism organization, where he worked in progressively senior positions in corporate planning and the Office of the President. Oliver holds a graduate certificate in international marketing from the University of Toronto and an undergraduate degree in economics and international politics from Wilfrid Laurier University. At the end of Oliver's presentation today, we'll do a Q&A. So just please use the chat function and we'll have a great discussion. And over to you, Oliver.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I just hate it when my bio is read. I'm just a regular guy. I just happen to have been in the tourism industry for about 20 years, mostly in a research and planning role. I'm not going to call myself an expert at all because I'm continually learning, but I do know research and I do know trends because I've been exposed to it for around 20 years. As Bonnie mentioned, I was formerly at the Destination Canada, Canada's national tourism marketing and tourism development company organization when I started my career. And then from there, I moved on to an organization called PATA, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and worked with destinations all over Asia that were focused on inbound and outbound travel, mostly in their brand analysis and impact measuring type of projects. And then for the last, I guess, 7.5 years, I've been a partner at 2031 Consulting. We do quite a bit of work with Bonnie and her team. We manage the ongoing program of research for the destination. We put out that monthly research insights newsletter, an economic analysis report to show the impact of tourism in the region and the power of tourism for the Southeastern Ontario region, and then also a consumer trends research study. And we're going to have those results relatively soon. Today, we're talking about market trends, and these are things that we think are likely to impact tourism recovery over the next year plus. I'm going to get into that in a second, but as Bonnie mentioned, we're going to do a Q&A after my my presentation. But again, there's a chat function that you have either on the bottom of the screen, top of the screen, or the right-hand side, depending on how you've set it up. If you have questions at any time, feel free to toss them into the chat. I'm not sure if you can do video or audio. I don't think you can because it's a webinar. But again, if you have questions or comments at any point, feel free to ask. I'm happy to make this more of a conversation. Okay, we're going to go into the actual presentation itself. So we're talking about 20 trends for 2022. So really the things that are shaping recovery of our tourism industry in Southeastern Ontario, in Canada, and the global level. Travel and tourism, as you well know, is a global industry. What happens in one market reverberates throughout the industry. Go back to the days of March 2020, and we were starting to get news out of Asia, really China, about this new respiratory illness. In Canada, we thought this was going to be a repeat of SARS, which we were on the front lines of in 2003. Canada was the third most affected country outside of China and Hong Kong. So we thought it was going to be, a similar kind of scenario where, we were going to have this respiratory illness. It was going to go through the population. It was going to have a high mortality effect. And then eventually it would dissipate and we'd get back to normal. So we were looking at, resumption of tourism back in the late spring, early summer of 2020. And God, we had that completely wrong, because it didn't turn out to just be an isolated incident. It spread very fast from Asia into Europe, then into the US. It took a long period of time before we fully understood how it was spread. For at least a year and a half, we were still hyper concerned with surfaces, believing that the virus would live on surfaces, and surfaces were going to be one of the major ways of how we were going to contract the disease. Now we know it's completely airborne spread, it's aerosol based, and we are in now, our fifth major strain of the virus. So we've been living with this in our society, in our tourism industry for, going on more than 2 years now. So it's had a very, very monumental impact on our tourism industry. I'm going to specifically speak about 8 trends, and we've chosen those because we think those are the ones with the most material impact on southeastern Ontario. So I briefly just touched on this, but on the left-hand side, you have the forecasting models. So, when this was really starting to impact us in a big way in March of 2020, there was talk of March break going to be extended to allow, the hospitals in Toronto and Kingston and Montreal and really throughout Canada to just have more of a chance to catch up because more people were getting sick. There was talk that we needed respirators. We were scrambling as a society. We started doing a whole series of forecasts in the tourism industry, and we thought, there's going to be a low dip, there's going to be a medium dip, or there's going to be a high dip. But eventually, we thought by the end of December 2020, the thinking was we might get back to some level of normalcy. So back to those 2019 numbers. And guess what? Scenario number 1, which is about a 58% or 60% decline in tourism, we thought that was going to happen, and then we would eventually bounce back by the end of December, and that didn't happen. And then we thought, maybe it's going to be about a 70% decline in tourism, and maybe by the early 2021, we're going to get back to 2019 levels. And then when that didn't happen, we thought, oh gosh, it's probably going to be about an 80% drop. It's going to be pretty sustained throughout all of 2020, but in 2021, middle of 2021 or the late summer of 2021, we were going to get back to levels of normalcy. And guess what? Every single one of those forecasts were wrong. Forecasts that were done by the World Tourism Organization, the UNWTO, which is the United Nations organization tasked with tourism development at the global level, the World Travel and Tourism Council out of London, the Adventure Travel Trade Association, Destination Canada. So many organizations put out forecasts largely based on econometric models. So really looking at the economic inputs that drive travel and whether or not there was going to be an impact and how that impact was going to manifest itself for the travel and tourism industry. And all of those forecasts were just dead wrong. And it's because there were so many other variables in the mix. Traditionally with tourism, when the economy is doing well, people travel because we have more disposable incomes in our pockets. We feel more open to having leisure-based spending, and then we're going to travel. And that model has pretty much taken us for the last 50 years of the modern age of our tourism industry. Now take into effect what happened in 1991 with the Gulf War. There was a massive drop in tourism, especially in Canada, because of our proximity to the US and how and the price of gas. It hit our economy, but we bounced back within 6 to 12 months. The 1997 economic crash in Asia, very much affected Canada. We bounced back within 6 months. The 2001 economic bubble, because of the tech boom, tourism dropped, we bounced back within 6 to 8 months. SARS, huge hit for the Ontario market because of Toronto being one of those ground zero, ground one destinations because of the huge population transfer between Hong Kong, Vancouver, and then onwards into Toronto. The business travel, the diaspora travel, and that dramatically impacted our industry. It took us about 4 years to recover from that. And then there was the economic crash of 2008, 2009. And again, big hit to the tourism. More people were traveling domestically within Canada, Southeastern Ontario, but then we ended up recovering. So we thought, all of those times we did those models, we looked at the economics behind them, and we thought everything is going to play out the same with COVID. And guess what? It just has not. We've gone from one strain to a lull, to then an increase in tourism, to a lull again, back in with the public health measures, cessation of economic activity and tourism, and that cycle has just repeated itself over the last 2 years. So we now look like we're in a bit of this lull period. The Ontario government has lifted, in most cases, has made the decision to lift, in most cases, these public health measures. They're getting rid of masking mandates, getting rid of COVID certificates. But, and this is a caution for all of us on this webinar today and all of us in our destinations or tourism businesses, that we have to have some level of caution to this, because if anything, we know with the Delta strain dramatically hit us, and then we went into lull and we thought everything was great. And then we had the Omicron variant, and we dramatically affected our industry and our society. We're now in a lull. We're not sure what's going to happen next. As virologists say, eventually over time, this thing will start dissipating. It will mutate, become more virulent, but less impactful for the average human, and we'll be able to probably live with it. But we don't seem to be in that territory anytime soon. Now, I'm going to stay away from the health discussion of this because I am by no means, I've got grade 12 biology or OAC biology. I'm definitely not a medical scientist person, but I understand consumer trends. And I'm going to tell you this right now, when there are little or no barriers to travel from a safety and security perspective, and the economy is doing well, people travel. Now, our economy is doing okay right now. There's a heck of a lot of government stimulus market that's flowing throughout the economy, which is giving confidence to the average Canadian consumer. But at the same point too, or a week and a half into this Russian invasion of Ukraine, the immediate impact on the Canadian economy is the price of fuel. And so we know the cost of petroleum right now, which is a major input for the travel and tourism industry, tour buses, cruise ships, airlines, the average leisure traveler for an auto trip, especially a large number of people coming to Southeastern Ontario, especially the diesel trains that come that Via Rail uses. This is a big input cost, not to mention for all the small SME tour operators and tour businesses and attractions out there and hotels. So we know this is a big hit for our economy. So we know there's still some caution with the health of our economy. Now I'm rambling, so let me get to the next side of this page here. So we thought, there's got to be a better way to predict how tourism is going to evolve in the time of COVID. So we thought, instead of just looking at the econometric side of the equation, what we really need to do is we also need to look at all of the defined consumer and market development shifts that occur over a period of time. And what better way to do that by then looking at secondary sources, the Economist magazine, Fast Company magazine, Skift, one of the world leaders in tourism research, CNN Travel, the New York Times, the Globe and Mail, the Guardian, Reuters. So a lot of news sources, a lot of academic sources to really go through them in detail and find out what they're saying about how consumers are traveling and how the tourism industry will evolve. And it's just a fact of life in our industry, but around November of every year, going back to the history of tourism, there is always going to be a series of articles, the top X trends, the top 10 trends, the top 20 trends, the top 50 trends that are likely going to impact tourism in the following year. And we see this every year. And what we thought as a team at 2031, there's got to be a better way to really understand how many of these are actually the truth and what sort of impact are they going to have on our industry. So what we did is we looked at a whole series of sources, about 75 sources. We came up with a matrix. So we're tourism consultants and we're management consultants, so we love models and matrices. But we came up with a model to try and evaluate these trends on a two-part scale. Its actual potential impact on the industry and its likely potential impact on a destination. And what we did is we came up with these 20 trends that I'm showing you here on the screen. And we broke them down by 4 major areas. The ones that are trends specifically because of COVID, what has happened in the time of COVID, how it's impacted directly businesses and how businesses evolved in the time of COVID. And we've come up with these ones on the left-hand side of the screen. Towards the middle of the screen, we've also looked at a number of trends that were accelerated because of COVID. So things that were happening that we saw and our consumer research was showing us, but then were very much accelerated because of COVID. Lockdowns, the real shift to domestic short-haul based trips, and the interest of Canadians to really explore places beyond, the top 20 Canadian destinations. And by that, I mean, we all know them: Niagara Falls, Banff, Toronto, Montreal, etc. Towards the right-hand side of the screen here, but still in the middle, then we looked at some systemic or ongoing trends. So things that have kind of been with us for a period of time, both on the positive side and the negative side, or less positive side. And again, we think, these are going to continue with us. And then on the far right-hand side, we have these new opportunities. Things have just really emerged in the last 6 months. Now, the thing with a trend, it really has a two-part impact. It impacts the industry, because the industry usually has to evolve or react in relation to how it's impacting the consumer. Our industry was the leader in that sort of trend when it came to the internet. We saw the internet come out in the last 20 years. We thought, look, this could dramatically affect and impact how we communicate with consumers. And it could have a massive impact in terms of how we sell travel, online travel agencies. So we were kind of a first mover on that versus the consumer. But then in terms of social media, the consumer adopted it, and then the industry, the tourism industry, had to react to it. So these 20 trends that I've got here on the screen, and I'm going to go into detail on the ones that are in this darker orange color. We're going to talk about that over the next 35, 40 minutes. Now, some of you are going to be asking, well, you know what, Oliver, you're going too darn fast on those trends. Can we actually get a copy of that report? And I'm going to tell you this right now because we love Bonnie and her team so much, and we're big fans of Southeastern Ontario. Everyone that has attended this webinar gets access to the report. It's free, it's good reading. I know you either run destinations or you have tourism businesses, so maybe you can have a cup of coffee in the morning and read it, or a nice scotch or a glass of wine on the weekend and read it. But we'll make sure that everyone has a copy. And actually, you know what, not to play favorites for everyone that's attending the webinar today, but we can actually make it available to anyone via the RTO9 industry website. So it's a very, very detailed report, and it goes to a lot more detail than what I'm going to present today, but it's worth a read. Because if you're a tourism business, there's something in here that's going to help you have a competitive advantage to sell your product or service. If you're one of the 10 destinations in Southeastern Ontario, it's a way for you to either think of product and experience development, how you communicate, market your destination, or how you communicate the value of tourism to your city council or stakeholders. So there's multiple ways that you can use this research. The point is, it's a report, and there's some good nuggets in here if you're a tourism business or a destination. We're going to go into the 8 trends. So the first one, it's kind of a no-brainer. We all know it. But health and safety is very much now the standard. Now, going back 20 years, when I started off my career at Destination Canada, we were never really concerned about the whole issue of safety and security. Canada is a safe destination. People come here from all over the world that sometimes come from destinations where you have to lock your doors at night or you have gated communities. And when they come to Canada, they rave about how safe and open and welcoming it is. So for Canadians, it's never really been an issue. It was an issue from a negative perspective, but not really any sort of systematic change in 2003 because people were just scared. It's like, I don't want to go into a hospital because I'll catch SARS. I don't want to go to, speak to a nurse or talk to a nurse because they might be carrying the disease. There was a lot of ignorance that was floating around. And generally speaking, we were worried as Canadians. But guess what? We got over it and we went back to our daily jobs. And for those of you that have traveled internationally and mostly in Asia Pacific, you've gone to Thailand or gone to China, or you've transferred at Narita Airport in Japan, you'll notice that a large number of Asia Pacific travelers travel with a mask. And that was always the case. It's just a cultural thing. If you're not feeling well, or if you've got a cold, you wear a mask. If you are in a crowded area, you wear a mask. You might be worried about germs or the spread of germs. And we would always look at those people and think, gosh, what are they doing? Just relax, everything's okay. Now we're in the situation, with the exception of, some of the population, but it is generally accepted to wear a mask. And it's accepted because of, a twofold. We've been told by public health officials that it's good for yourself because it's going to protect you against transmission of COVID and a lot of respiratory illnesses that are out there. And the second point too, it's being a good Canadian. It's protecting people around you from the potential germs that you might have. So it's now relatively accepted. And I know there's a lot of talk about it, mostly because of what's happening in the US, that it's a political issue. But from a health and safety standard perspective, it makes sense. Now, I'm not just talking about masks. I'm talking about everything else to do with health and safety. Operations, if you're a tourism business, you need to have hand sanitizer. Usually, probably have to have a health and safety policy. If you have to have some level of social distancing, we're still not up where we can have like unlimited people at concerts. So, this I think will be with us for a long period of time. And going back to the analysis that we did, many of the trends reports, it was a fait accompli that they listed health and safety as a trend that's going to be with us for a while. And that number here that you're seeing of 70% of travelers respect safety guidelines. This comes from multiple sources. It's FocusWire, which is one of those research firms that are out there. Our research says it's around 68 to 72%, depending on the market. But generally speaking, a majority of travel consumers, and especially Canadians, believe that health and safety is important when you're choosing a destination, choosing a tourism brand, and the type of experience that you're looking for. And again, that's why nature and environment-based trips, going out to national parks, conservation areas, camping, getting out on the water, things that you naturally socially distance, and you're more open to having that, clean air, a lot of circulation. Those types of trips and experiences are going to be in demand for the foreseeable future, and that's just a given. Let's go to the next one. So the whole idea with being inspired to travel either at a specific time, to a specific place, or to do a specific activity. Because of the last 2 years and Canadians' addiction to streaming platforms like Netflix, like Crave, like Disney Plus, like Amazon, like ITV, we are now very consumed with our media. The average Canadian and their time online on streaming content has doubled in the last year. And it doubled in the year before that. And that's mostly because, we weren't doing a lot of things. We were stuck at home or in lockdown. So streaming and social media are very key, even more so prior to the pandemic, for how consumers become aware of a tourism destination or an experience, potentially make the decision to travel to a destination or the type of experience, and then also the type of planning they do. So the implications here for destinations and operators are pretty straightforward. Number one, you have to have good, refreshed, inspiring content online. If you're a small SME, get a Facebook page, post photos, bring the consumer along in that journey to get them aware and excited about your tourism experience. Now, that I mentioned that RTO9 research that's done every year on branding and consumer travel intentions. The research that was presented in April of 2021, it's not even a year ago, and it seems like a decade in the time of COVID, but that research was pretty clear. It said that the average Ontario and Quebec travel consumer, they're somewhat aware of Southeastern Ontario, generally speaking, as a tourism destination. However, they are really, really not aware in terms of the nitty-gritty detail of the myriad tourism destinations that exist within Southeastern Ontario. They'll know Kingston, they'll probably know Bay of Quinte, they'll probably know Prince Edward County, they'll probably know the Thousand Islands. But then their knowledge of other destinations, sub-destinations, and regions within that area and the broader area of Southeastern Ontario and a lot of the tourism experiences is quite limited. I say this all the time, but the average Ontario consumer, we know more about Dominican Republic and Puerto Plata and Veradero Beach in Dominican Republic, in Cuba, or Cancun and the Mayan Riviera in Mexico, than we know about the top 20, 40, and 50 destinations in Canada. Sure, we'll all know the top 10 destinations. We all know Niagara Falls. We all know Toronto. But what we don't know is we just don't know, what there is to see and do and the things that are on offer in Southeastern Ontario. And that's really, our big opportunity. It's a little bit our fault as a tourism industry because it's so easy to promote the top 10 destinations or outbound destinations at the expense of Canadian destinations, and especially those in Southeastern Ontario. So, the implication of this is, the real importance of social media and refined, new, refreshed content on a regular basis to connect with those travel consumers. And also, the importance of thinking beyond pushed media into what's called earned media. So the whole idea of having, good quality content in lifestyle magazines, the Globe and Mail tourism section, Cottage Life magazine. If it's either an editorial or an advertorial, it still has a material impact on the average Ontario and Quebec consumer to choose a destination or experience. Now, this is all related to it, but the whole notion of pre-trip research. Pre-trip research is just so darn critical. Prior to COVID, the booking window was a lot longer. We would plan things out well in advance, right? If we were thinking, what am I going to do in July and August with my family, or my young kids, or my spouse, or my friends? You kind of formulate those opinions in, the January, December area. It's cold, it's dark in Ontario. You want to be inspired. You start doing a little bit of planning. You probably make your booking decision around March. If you're looking at cottages, you'd probably make your decision around, February. Now, I'm actually probably going to contradict myself, but I don't mean to. But people are actually booking cottages now like a year in advance because there's so few of them in Ontario, and we're mostly doing domestic trips. But the whole notion of pre-trip research, we're doubling down on that. We are researching a destination and experience 6 ways to Sunday. We're doing this because we're unsure of the public health requirements. We're not sure of the opening hours. The whole notion of do they have enough sufficient staff from a workforce perspective, and are they going to be open? Are they going to keep their hours? I've got a cottage, my wife and I and my son, we have a cottage in Muskoka. This summer, when we were at the cottage for 6 weeks, about 3 times we tried to go for dinner on a patio. First time, the restaurant was closed on a Wednesday, which is unheard of pre-COVID, and again because they couldn't get any staff. The next time we went on a Thursday, we showed up at 4 o'clock for dinner and everything was booked because everyone was flocking to the outside patios, not inside. And then again, the third time we tried another place and it was just closed on a Tuesday. So, pre-trip research at the very tactical level, where am I going, destination, what am I doing in the destination, where am I gonna have my meals, where am I gonna do my hikes, where am I gonna be staying? This is a lot of research that the average Ontario consumer is gonna do. So now let's go back to what I had said before. The average Ontario consumer and Quebec consumer, we don't know a lot about Southeastern Ontario. So what they're doing, if they're trying to formulate a plan in their head, is they're going to be grasping at anything and everything to try and formulate that trip and that opinion of that trip and what they're going to do in that trip. So we have to make darn sure that we have good current factual information that's available out there for travelers to find and research and review. Last minute and flexible travel goes mainstream. So again, Canadians, we like to plan, right? We just like to plan. In the fall, you talk about what you're going to be doing in, February or March break, and that's where we flock to destinations at that time. But we've made those trips, either in August or in September and October, generally speaking, before COVID happened. Now in the time of COVID, everything is last minute. I've been researching the whole notion of the booking window for 20 years. When I started off my career at Destination Canada, the booking window was a year. It just was a year. It's like you just finished the summer vacation, you're either back at work or your kids are back at school, it's September or October, and you're already thinking, what am I going to do next summer? And we start making those plans, right? You go to the local travel agency, or you go to an online travel agent like Expedia or Kayak, and you just book your travel. It's just a thing. That's what we do as Canadians. But what we've observed, and especially with the Ontario and Quebec consumer, and especially for domestic-based trips, is we're doing things last minute. And it's all geared to public health guidelines. Are they high and restrictive, or are they low and unrestrictive? And or the whole notion of just this whole mental health and wellness trend that's kicked off, and Canadians need to just kind of recharge the batteries because we're continually subjected to all of this kind of negative consuming news about COVID. It's just not a cool thing. I'm 2 years in lockdown now, and it's just not fun. It's just not fun. You're thinking, this is my life, and when is this going to end? So last minute and flexible travel is just a given. If you're a tourism business, you have to roll with the punches. It's going to be hard to manage cash flow and predict cash flow, but on the positive side, travel intentions and pent-up demand for tourism, especially for this summer and this fall, is extremely high with Ontario and Quebec consumers. And so we are going to see a big flood, barring any sort of new virulent strain and the resumption of public health guidelines. We're going to see a big resumption of domestic travel in Southeastern Ontario this summer and this fall. So we just have to roll with it as an industry, to be flexible, allow for cancellations, keeping in mind that we know this is, it's really tough for SMEs, but it's what the consumer expects. And what we need to do as an industry is we need to listen to the consumer, and I know you all know that. Same point too, with that high demand, and this is a positive thing for the average Ontario tourism business, higher demand means higher prices. Now, let's talk about the economy. The price of oil is going up, inflation is going up, which means the input costs for SMEs is going up. Those prices must be translated back into a higher ticket price or a gate price, and the consumer, the visitor, is just going to have to live with it, because we as an industry have to ensure that we are a viable industry. These are our livelihoods, and we need to charge a proper price. And the consumers will understand this. Eventually, most consumers will understand this. So because demand is so high, we're not going to be getting back to the summer 2019 type of pricing, but we are going to be getting much closer than the prices that we had in the dark days of the summer of 2020 and 2021, this past summer, where we just thought the only way to get people in the door is to slash prices, to stimulate demand. But we don't need to stimulate demand. Demand is pretty damn high right now. So that trend is definitely going to continue. High demand, which means higher pricing for the tourism product. And it's not a complete full upside because our input costs are higher, but it's definitely an upside for the average tourism business. Single destination, longer stays. Now, this is an interesting point for Southeastern Ontario. Generally speaking, our length of stay in Southeastern Ontario, depending on where you are, if you want to look at the average, was about 1.3 nights, which is really low, right? It's people are coming to the region and they're staying the night. So they might be having a lunch, a dinner, a breakfast, and a lunch, or a dinner, a breakfast, and then leaving. So not a lot of economic activity pumped into the destination. And it usually means that they are, they're not staying long and they're not exploring a lot of the destination beyond what we would say are the major gateways, like Kingston on the western side, and then maybe like Gananoque and the Thousand Islands on the eastern side, and Kingston on the western side. So what we have observed, and again, this is hard data from our statistical research that we do on a regular basis, and we've noticed this in 2020 and also in 2021, there's definitely a trend. Canadians are interested in a single destination for their quote unquote primary vacation, and they're looking to stay longer. So as where Southeastern Ontario would have been like a kind of a short trip, a getaway trip, might go see friends and relatives and then go home for the weekend, or you might bring Junior to a tournament, a sporting tournament, and then go away after a day or a night. Canadians are more likely to travel to places outside of the top 10 tier cities, which means this puts Southeastern Ontario on the map, and they're going to want to stay for an extended long weekend, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Monday to Friday, or if we're lucky, a Monday to Sunday. And this means as an industry, we need to ensure that we have effective itineraries, which are notional ideas of what you're going to do, a package, which is usually a price point associated with an itinerary, that need to extend beyond 1 to 2 nights or 2 to 3 nights at most. They need to go into the 4 to 6 night or 4 to 7 night perspective, which means we're really looking at either basing ourselves in one destination, sub-destination, like for instance Bay of Quinte, and then maybe looking at other things to do in immediate vicinities. Like you go to Bay of Quinte, you might go to Prince Edward County, you might go to Kingston, or you might go to Frontenac, you might go to Kingston, you might go to Gananoque on the same trip. And this really drives home the importance of really the main purpose of RTO9 as an Ontario-based regional tourism organization, and that is the notion of regional dispersal throughout the region. Now, we all think of destinations as distinct elements, right? Because we've got our own destination, we've got our own brand, we've got our own staff, we're beholden to our board of directors or city council or other types of stakeholders. But guess what? Consumers really don't understand any of that, nor do they care. They're coming to Southeastern Ontario, and which means they might stay in one area overnight, but travel to another area for that trip, or multiple areas. So we have to get in the mindset that we need to think beyond immediate geographic borders to really ensure that we are meeting the consumer with what they want to do, and they want that notion of a longer stay. And what do they want to do? They want to do experiences. So, when I started my career at Destination Canada, it was all about these, what we would call demand generators. So, the big thing that you become aware of in the destination and that you do in the destination. So, before Canada's Olympic Park or Paramount Canada's Wonderland was, before it became a theme park in the middle of a subdivision just outside of Toronto, it was literally in the middle of nowhere, right? And people would come from jurisdictions outside of GTA. They'd come from Burlington or Oakville or Brampton or Brantford or Kingston, and you would come for the weekend to Canada's Wonderland. And then you might tack on some stuff in Toronto. Or, the same might be true for Niagara Falls. You go see the falls, and then you might tack on some other things for it. You might go to Stratford Festival in Niagara, but then, go see a bunch of things in Niagara Lake, a couple wineries, maybe Fort George, maybe do a cycling trip. And the same kind of thing is true for Southeastern Ontario. You're a water-based destination in the mindsets of a lot of Canadian consumers. So you would go and you would probably do a boating cruise in the Thousand Islands, and then you might stay a night in one of the other areas and go for a nice meal, and that would be it. Or you'd go to Sandbags because it's the main demand generator, or it's always been the main demand generator. But we got to think beyond that. We have to think, the consumer doesn't necessarily just want to go to the museum. They want to go behind the doors that say staff only, and they want to talk to the curator of the museum to find out, the nuance of a painting and how it became in the hands of the museum. And that really means the stories behind a tourism product. And that's really what an experience is. So we as an industry have to think beyond theme parks or zip lines or just a one-off festival or a one-off museum, and we have to think, how can we package that together in terms of an experience that really truly inspires someone to get off their bum, over to the computer, do a bit of research, and book. And so let's go back to the notion of many of you have probably been to Europe, right? Europe is just it's a rite of passage for Canadians to go to once in their lifetime, right? You go to London, maybe go to Paris, you maybe go to Italy, you maybe go to Spain. Those tend to be the top 4 destinations for Canadians. You're going because of the romanticism or some brand notion with Europe. You might, be interested in some of those things that are what we've called demand generators, like the Eiffel Tower or Big Ben in London. But really, it's the experience behind that trip. And Europe has done wonders about doubling down on the whole notion of the experience the last 20 years. Some places in Asia have been really good about doing it for the last, 10 or so years. We as Canadians, we talk about experiences, but we still market products. And products tend to be very stale or very two-dimensional or, very infrastructure heavy. But really, we need to promote the emotional side of what you feel when you travel to a destination. And easier said than done. I'm not a marketer, the folks at Alphabet are, but I'm not. But I can tell you, for all the quantitative and qualitative research I've done over the last few years, I can tell you it is just completely shifting to this whole idea that people value that experience and are willing to pay more for it than if you were to just promote something like a one-off tourism product or 2 tourism products. Now, this one is probably not the thing that most of you want to hear, right? Because we're a domestic-based tourism destination. And largely speaking, 93% of the travel that's coming into the province of Ontario, or that's in the province of Ontario, or actually Ontarians traveling within the province. So our actual international component is quite small. We benefit from having a very large population in Ontario, though. But international travel, and again, we've just finished one massive wave of our tourism tracking research. And I can tell you this right now, Canadians want to travel internationally. We have not traveled internationally in a big way, for business, for leisure, for visiting friends and relatives. So there is likely to be a very, very strong component of a resumption of international travel. Now, the thing is, it's still so darn confusing to travel. Anytime our government comes out with a public health announcement, it's really how the media interprets it is how we're going to interpret it as consumers. And that message is then just copied for all the different public health areas, right? So, Ontario might come up with an announcement, but so does Quebec, and so does Dominican Republic, and so does Air Canada, and so does Marriott Hotels. And we as consumers are thinking, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on? So there's still a tremendous amount of confusion for the average Canadian consumer when it comes to thinking beyond a comfort zone. And comfort tends to be a domestic-based trip right now. So, this is probably a bit of a double-edged sword, I think. It's like yes, there's going to be international travel, but I think the risk for us right now as a domestic tourism industry is probably not in a big way until, probably towards the end of the summer. In August, we'll probably see more Canadians traveling internationally. And I'm only saying that because Canadians tend to travel internationally July and August. And I think it might be a little bit too soon for July because, we're a little bit closer than how they would normally book that trip. On the other side of this is, I think we're going to see a resumption of tourism from the US into Southeastern Ontario. And so this is a good thing. We're going to start seeing a lot more US-based travelers. We'll probably start seeing a number of Brit, German, French foreign travelers that would probably start from visiting friends and relatives or visiting their friends and relatives that are in Canada. And those people tend to want to explore their own backyard and to show off, where they are based on, family and friends that are coming from overseas. Hey, guess what, folks? That's it. I'm just going to look at my clock right now. Yeah, so we have 50 minutes left on the clock for some questions and comments. And I'll be really happy to entertain those now.
Thanks, Oliver.
Hey, Bonnie.
I'm just going to take a look and see if we've got anything in the question or chat. Oh, we've got something in here. Give me 1 second here. Oh, no, actually. No, I'm not actually. Oh, I do. Now I do. Sorry. Do you feel things will be back to normal by 2023?
Oh, do you want to introduce yourself so that I can feel stupid when it doesn't come true? And then you can email me and you can say, I told you so, Oliver. If you want to tell me your name, it would be great. I just can make it a little bit more personal. It'd be good to find out what destination you're from. But I'm going to tell you this right now. The current Destination Canada forecasts that are available on Destination Canada's website, and I think we actually, we did a quick little summary of them in an RTO9 research newsletter a few months ago. They're calling for the resumption of international tourism to 2019 levels by the middle of 2025, but that will fast forward 1 year quicker if more Canadian travelers travel domestically in terms of the revenue. So we'll start seeing a resumption of 2019 numbers, largely speaking, based on domestic travel by 2024. But to your point, is this going to return by 2023? No, I don't think it's going to. It's I think we're not out of this whole cyclical nature of COVID, and we're looking a lot more positive for a good summer travel season and probably a good fall travel season. But the minute the weather turns cold and Canadians go returning back indoors, that's when we start seeing these circulation rates of the virus increase. And I wouldn't put it surprise some of our public health officials to then do what they need to do from a public health perspective, and then that just has a detrimental effect on our tourism industry. So no, we're definitely not going to get to 2019 numbers by 2023. And I'm pretty darn sure on that. Yeah.
Okay, we do have another question, Oliver. So do you think traveler preferences for experiential stays will stay status quo, increase, or decrease?
Yeah, so good point. So definitely increase, right? We're not a homogeneous market. There's many different types of travel consumers. And I know there was a webinar series a few weeks ago by Environics Analytics that does some pretty awesome analysis of different market segments. And there's a whole slew of them based on lifestyle and values and demographics. And so we as consumers, we're not all the same. We're very, very different, right? And it's usually based on life stage and values. So there will be a segment of the market that will always just travel for a single product, right? People that like to go fishing, people that like to go ATVing, people that like to go cross-country skiing, people that like to go to the theater, and those kind of things will always exist. But with all the monumental research that has been done by Destination Canada and Destination Ontario and my firm and other organizations that exist out there, the writing is pretty much on the wall. If you're a destination or tourism business and you want to A, increase the length of stay, and then B, increase the average spend of a visitor, then there's the notion of turning this into an experience. And so some destinations are doing this more. Some tourism organizations are doing this more because they realize, instead of getting 1,000 travelers just spending not a lot in the destination, maybe we can get 100 that spend a lot more because they stay longer, they do more things. And look, all of us on the phone, we're all travelers, right? We're all travel consumers. So, do you just want to do one activity, or do you want to do multiple activities? Even those of us that go to those all-inclusive resorts, somewhere in that all-inclusive resort, we're like, oh gosh, I'm bored. And, you want to go see dolphins or go scuba diving, or, if it's a ski vacation, you want to go tubing or sledding. So that's the just anecdotal evidence on it. But our statistics research is pretty clear, that we want to do experiences.
Okay, great. Thanks, Oliver, for all the input. I'm not seeing anything else in the questions or the chat, so I guess we've got we can wrap up a few minutes early. As Oliver noted in the beginning or partway through, the presentation will be available on rto9.ca. We encourage you to take a look. The recording will be there as well. And we've got a couple more workshops coming up this month. So again, we encourage you to get on our industry news or our industry website, and check those webinars out. And thank you everyone for attending today. And thank you, Oliver, for a great presentation.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And Bonnie, I'll make sure that everyone has, that you have access to the presentation as well as the 20 trends, and then you can distribute that on your industry website.
Excellent. Thanks, Oliver.
Okay.
Have a great day.
That's great. Yeah, thanks everyone. Okay, thanks for joining.